So I've been playing Killer is Dead. So, now that I'm finally done with all of that Halloween Thortober crap, I can finally stop pretending to like horror games, and continue reviewing the kind of stuff I usually would. You know, weird shit. And weird shit we shall most certainly have. For today, I'll be reviewing Killer is Dead. Now, I clearly remember seeing a trailer for this game back when it was first announced, and I remember thinking that it looked awesome. But after that, it went quiet for a while. And when the game resurfaced to my attention, it did so in a way I didn't expect. Because it did so in the way of controversy. All because of the game's now infamous Gigolo Mode. You see, Suda51 hates women, and he deserves to die.
The job? Killer is Dead.
So, Killer is Dead is a heartfelt romantic comedy about an assassin named Mondo Zappa. In a way somewhat similar to Killer 7, Mondo goes after a number of different targets, and therefore the game is split up into what are essentially a few separate stories that all come together in the end. Well, sort of. What ties all these stories together are the links they seem to have to Mondo's childhood. And not being sure with what exactly is going on, he sets out to find answers. Well, sort of. Now, the game is meant to be a darker version of James Bond. And in a really weird way, it kinda is. Catchy one-liners, slickness, and of course a healthy dose of womanizing.
Mondo-san, here's a little gift from me.
The game is a lot darker than Lollipop Chainsaw was, but it's certainly not as serious as Killer 7. I like it though, but it also makes for a few awkward moments. For instance, the game tries to have this serious death scene, only to have it be followed by... Again, I like it, but I also realize that it might not be the greatest way of handling your storytelling. Still, I can really only admire the amount of style and general awesomeness Suda managed to squeeze into this game. And sure, it carries some similarities to Killer 7, but I really don't see how that could possibly be a bad thing. And it's definitely a lot darker. Like, literally. The whole game is just drenched in shadows. And it looks pretty cool if you ask me. Although I do feel that this is mostly done to hide the fact that the game kinda looks like shit. I mean, the character models are a little rough around the edges, and the textures aren't great either. But because the game is completely drenched in style, you don't really notice. Also, I really like how the game handles lighting. Everything just has this moisty and misty feel to it, with bokeh balls coming out of the wazoo. I also really like the game's music too, once again being done by ex-Silent Hill composer Akira Yamaoka. The soundtrack has a lot of dark trip-hop and smooth jazz, which jives really well with the game's art style. There's definitely some stuff in there I can see myself listening to outside of the game, you know, if the full soundtrack of the game actually existed. But it's certainly more like what I expect an Akira Yamaoka soundtrack to sound like compared to the Lollipop Chainsaw OST. Overall, I'd say it definitely has a lot of elements I felt were kind of lacking in Lollipop Chainsaw. That isn't to say that I didn't like Lollipop Chainsaw or anything, but something about the dark suit and tie assassin stuff just really tickles my fancy. I mean, back when I was still a dumb fucking teenager, me and my current cameraman slash behind the scene guy tried to make a short film in a style very similar to both Killer is Dead and Killer 7. And now that I'm a dumb fucking adult, I'm pretty happy to see that we weren't the only ones stupid enough to actually make something like that. Gameplay wise, it's pretty similar to Lollipop Chainsaw. So not extremely deep, but slick and fast enough to be fun. Just like in Lollipop Chainsaw, you mindlessly hack away at shit until it dies, and you can dodge and parry with the push of a button. By killing enemies, Mondo can collect their blood, which can be used to trigger special finishing moves kinda like in Killer 7. What's really weird is that the gameplay almost seems like it's even dumber than it was in Lollipop Chainsaw, but at the same time it also seemed a lot more fun to actually play. Thing is that with every hit you land, the game kinda pauses for only a fraction of a second. And at the same time, the controller gives off a mild shake. This makes it seem like every single hit carries a lot more impact to it than it would otherwise. and it makes the game so much more satisfying to play than it has any right to. Also, because parrying and dodging is all done with a single button, it kinda turns the fights into this really cool sword dance of skill, kinda like as it does in Metal Gear Rising. Only difference is that in Rising, you actually need to be good at the game to have fights like that. But in Killer is Dead, all fights end up being like that. And to make it even better, every enemy that dies violently explodes into a frenzy of pickups. Which brings me to the upgrade system. Thing is, enemies can drop a variety of different colored items, and each color represents a different attribute. For instance, blue gems raise your max health, red roses increase the amount of blood you can store, and the yellow colored moon crystals, which basically act as regular points, can be spent on new combos. Now what's really cool here is that the finishing move allows you to choose which one of these items you get right before you execute it. So you can actually strategize the way Mondo grows if that's what you're into. Also, at the end of each mission you earn some money, which can be spent on additional moon crystals or gifts you can use in Gigolo Mode. All of this together works out pretty well. The gameplay might be simple, but I definitely had a lot of fun with it. The only thing I really didn't like about it are the occasional QuickTime events. While nowhere near as prevalent as in Lollipop Chainsaw, you still need to viciously waggle your stick when you get stunned, or ram the square button whenever you experience a collision of blades. Also, something I'd really like to address is the fact that the game kinda suffers from its lower budget. Thing is, the frame rate is really janky, and the game has a shit ton of screen tearing going on as well. Also, the way Mondo collides with his surroundings just seems a little weird too. Walking upstairs or into objects just feels really weird and floaty, and it almost seems as if he's just clipping up the stairs rather than actually walking them. Still, I didn't encounter any game-breaking glitches or anything like that, and compared to other low-budget games, it really does more right than it does wrong. Now, the reason why this game received so much controversy is the infamous Gigolo Mode. Gigolo Mode is an optional minigame where the objective is to get jiggy with girls. Now, it certainly does feel a little weird and out of place. In fact, Suda himself actually said that it wasn't even his decision to put this in the game, but that it's just something the Japanese publisher of the game wanted. But still, I honestly feel that the only reason that this was blown so much out of proportion is only just so that a bunch of would-be journalists could get their next controversial scoop. Anyway, in Gigolo Mode, you engage in a conversation with a lady. Whilst doing this, you must engage your
Gigolo Vision!
which is basically Mondo just looking her in the eyes. Doing this will fill up your guts gauge. When it's full, you win and receive a weapon upgrade. Now, every once in a while she'll look away. While she's doing this, you can stare at her assets. By doing that, you somehow learn more about her interests, and then you give her gifts based on that? Sure. All in all, I just didn't find it very interesting, really. I mean, there just isn't a whole lot going on gameplay-wise, and it all feels like it just drags on way longer than it probably should. Also, there really isn't any dialogue or anything either. I feel that if the Gigolo missions were more like an erotic Persona 4, it probably would have been a lot more fun to actually do. But as it is now, it was just kinda boring to me. And if I really felt the need to rub one out mid-game, I could have just paused the game and looked up some porn. Anyway, despite the game obviously being made on a very low budget, I did really end up liking it a lot. And I've really gained a lot of respect for Suda51 over the past month or two. I mean, the dude's just extremely creative, and I really like his dark and humorous way of storytelling. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to... I need to,